All right, today we're going to clear up one of the most misunderstood deal structures in creative finance, the Morby Method. I want to say this clearly up front. This is a Morby Method deal, not Morby adjacent, not creative, but not Morby. It's not any of that. It's exactly what a Morby Method is supposed to look like when it's done correctly. These are also known as a stack method, depending on what community you're in nowadays. The confusion comes from people mixing Morby methods with wraps, subject to, assumptions, and other structures that have nothing to do with it. So today I'm going to walk you through what a Morby method actually is, what it is not. I'll break down a real deal step by step so you can see how it works in the real world. And if you watch my other videos, you may have seen this deal before. All right, let's define this clearly because words matter. A Morby method deal has only two required components. First off, the first thing is a new, let's put that up here, first position. If you're taking over a first position loan, you're doing subject to, or buying equity, or some kind of wrap, you're doing anything else that is not a Morby method. The second part of it is, that's number one, seller carry. I needed a moment there. Seller carries back. Now, what happens in this area, that can go a lot of different ways. And that's it, that's the Morby method. New loan, seller carry. Now, a new loan is originating first position and the seller carries back some or all of the equity, usually the down payment, sometimes more. That's the structure. This does not require subject to, doesn't require wraps, taking over existing loans, zero money down or getting paid at closing. Those can be possibilities. Those can happen, but they're not part of what makes a Morby method. Can you subject to or wrap this to somebody else? Absolutely. Can somebody else take over your existing loans? Sure, we've done this before. Now, let's look at what it's not, and here's where deals get killed. People start combining unrelated concepts. A subject to does not equal a Morby, a wrap does not equal a Morby, an assumption does not equal a Morby, or stack method. Let me say this clearly. Morby method does not require leaving existing debt in place, wrapping loans, or taking title subject to. In fact, most Morby deals use brand new senior debt. I tell you, all deals do that are Morby method. If someone tells you we need to do a wrap to make this Morby, or that person just doesn't understand the structure. And if you let that confusion run in your deal, the lender's title and escrow, the deal will die. So why is this confusion showing up in this deal? Let's talk about it. In this deal I'm about to walk through, the buyer kept saying, if we do a sub to a wrap, then we can buy Morby it. That's backwards. They were trying to force either other creative tools into the structure that does not need them, or they just don't understand what they're talking about. What I had to explain was, we are originating a new first position loan. The seller's carrying back the equity. That's the Morby method. And it's amazing how quickly they can confuse that. So let's walk through a real Morby method deal with actual numbers. We broke this one down last week, so you may have seen it again. Let's go back at it. California. Lovely state, beautiful place. Purchase price, $950. Starting to come back together. Have you seen this one before? New DSCR loan, first position. This is gonna be 75% LTV. So that's 75% of your $950,000 purchase price, which will be $712,000 or $712,500. And the seller is willing to carry $360,000. Seller finance, $360,000. Because the seller wanted at closing $590,000 to seller. There we go, just writing all these notes down. All right, as you can tell, important things to note that the combined leverage of the debts on the property right here, these are the only debts that will be on the property, the first position loan and the seller carry. We now have a high leverage scenario. This matters later, so we'll talk about that. Closing one looks like completely normal to the outside world. DSCR lender brings $712,500. Buyer or transactional lender would bring the down payment, which is, we didn't write that down, but it is $237,500. And you have origination and closing, which is about another $35,000 that needs to be brought to the table. Your transactional lender can also provide that if you ask nicely. At this closing, the seller will receive $590,000, and the remaining funds that are in the deal, because obviously we have the down payment that came into the deal, those funds will be held back and go to another closing. So we're gonna take $360,000. This is closing one, and I apologize that I'm all over the whiteboard today. Closing two. So we're going backwards right now, just to show how backwards some people are in their understanding of this. The closing number two, the seller signs a second position note for $360,000. So seller financing, 360, and now that note replaces the holdback. So from that $360,000, we're gonna pay our transactional lender. We'll pay back the buyer or the transactional lender for the closing and origination fees. And also the transactional lender has a fee in there, usually about 2.5, 3% of whatever they bring to the deal. A transactional coordinator will also get paid at this point. And then your final capital stack is set with the seller financing and the DSCR. So whatever is left at the end of this deal, and which is a Morby Method, full stop, that's the end of that deal, we can see what the buyer would get, which we calculated last time that they would get $80,000 roughly, minus agent fees if they're involved. Now, important point, getting paid at closing is not what makes this a Morby Method. Sometimes the buyer gets paid, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they still bring money to close. Defining factor is seller carry replaces buyer equity, not whether the buyer walks with the check. Now, we can also talk about another strategy called a ghost Morby. I won't get into the details of it, but that equity can, seller carry note can just dissipate, which is fun to watch, but also talk to your transactional lender of their concerns on that kind of deal. Now here's the experience matters. The math works, but the deal is fragile. What are our risks in a Morby Method? This one, as you can tell, if the property appraises for $950,000 and we have $712,000, $500,000 and $360,000, that means our total leverage on this property is 113%. Okay, that's one risk. Number two risk, DSCR lender. Are you using the right lender to do this kind of transaction? Otherwise, you may get in a pickle where they're asking your second position to give up their note and walk away because they didn't allow you to carry a seller second. Now that's gonna require the lender's consent. You need to keep all the parties involved above board and knowledgeable about what you're doing in the transaction. The other risk is the seller carry second position, their tolerance to being in second position, because there are risks with that and they need to understand the transaction as well. We're not gonna get into this another version of this, but there are options where you can do seller equity in the entity that owns the property instead of a second position lien, which is a whole different kind of structure. Still same Morby Method structure, but a different structure within that. The other risk that you want to watch out for is a balloon. On this particular one, it was a short-term balloon. So how are you gonna make this property worth a lot more? Because if you only get 80% or 75% LTV, when that balloon comes, how are you paying that note off? That's something to consider. So the deal only works if the DSCR lender allows a second at that leverage, title escrow paper the holdback correctly, because there are legal concerns, and the refi risk is understood upfront. And that's why math alone doesn't make a deal viable, execution does. So here's the takeaway. This is a Morby Method. It's not wraps, it's not subject to, it's not buzzwords, it's capital stack engineering. And most deals fall apart because people use the right word but don't understand the structure. If you're bringing deals like this or trying to explain them to sellers or lenders, this is exactly the kind of thing I help structure and pressure test. If you want more breakdowns like this, subscribe. If you want help structuring a deal the right way, that's what I do. You can check in the comments for my links. Submit any deal, I'm happy to assess them for free.